Hey Nick, how's everything going?
Hey Josh, doing great. How about you?
Not bad, not bad. Just getting by.
Yeah, getting by, getting it going. You said that
Yep.
it's getting a little colder there where you are. It's
Yep.
always nice, kill all those germs. They seem to promulgate a lot faster in warm climates,
Oh
and
yeah.
so it's nice to have a little bit of cold, freeze it over. Especially in Las Vegas, like it's such a great season for Halloween. It's one of the best places to really do Halloween because you
Oh
can
yeah.
really, walk around and still be comfortable, and there's
Yeah.
barely any wind or rain or snow or any of that. And it's kind of like one of the best months, I believe, to be there in Nevada is October. Maybe
Ah,
early November, like the first 2 weeks, but end of September, all of October, and a bit of November is always a great time.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's always nice
Yeah.
during the day, and then well, lately it's been,
So, like
high
you and I
80s.
talked about before we jumped on the recording, let's talk a little bit about why we made the shift or why we had interest in doing wholesaling. Because as the listeners may or may not know, we both started as agents,
Yep.
and perhaps we can share a little bit as to why an agent, which is one way of working, would ever be interested in this investing thing, which is a little bit more of a business. I feel like the agent side of things, it's a little more like independent contractor,
Yeah.
but it's not quite the feeling of having your own business. And I felt like the wholesaling was always one of those things. I always thought, well, one day I'll graduate to it. I knew wholesaling was a thing, but I just didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the know-how to just start doing it. I saw a couple of YouTube videos, and I got the idea, I got the concept,
Yeah.
but how do you approach it? From what angle?
Yep.
How it actually goes down?
And it
That
seems
took me a
really
little bit of time.
complicated too. It seems that's
Yeah,
'cause I watched a few YouTube videos and it seemed really complicated.
yeah.
So that's why I was like, how do you get into doing this? Um, it's I don't know, it seems like way too hard or way too complicated. And to me, it's actually very, very simple, but being a realtor kind of helped me out in that direction.
Yeah, tell me more about that. So you started as a realtor. You were sort of doing. Were your first clients mainly buyers, like for myself,
Oh yeah.
or did you have a good blend? Or
No, I wanted sellers, but just like when you start out in the game, like you have to get the buyers first in order to gain the sellers.
sure,
And but that was my main thing. I was like, oh, I want sellers, and it wasn't working out. So I was like, you know what? All right, fine. I'll just start marketing towards buyers because it's a little bit easier. Well, to me, it was a little bit easier and less upfront cost to it because
sure.
there's a cost of getting sellers. And then I started seeing buyers, helping buyers out, and I'm like, well, I started seeing, a lot of renovated properties. I'm like, well, actually, you know what? I think I might just go down the investment side of it because I see that if I can have them as a buyer, represent them as a buyer or buyer's agent, then I can also negotiate that I want to sell the property. And then if I could sell the property, have my sign out there, then I could generate more seller leads for that area. I was like, so that's kind of my step in the door. I was like, I'm gonna try that. And so I was trying it, and a lot of these investors are like, look, these houses aren't gonna work. Like ones on the MLS aren't gonna work. I'm like, well, that's all there is. Like, no. There's properties off market, this and that. And I'm like, what? So then I started, talking to wholesalers here and there that had off market properties, and I started finding a few deals here and there, but they were still pretty garbage. And then I'm like, how do you do this? I started getting into it where it's like I started finding my own off market deals or talking to people. They're like, oh yeah, this crappy house. So then I would get that investor in, and then the investor's like, okay, yeah, no, you found a great house. Like I'm gonna buy it. So they would go buy it. Some of them I made commission on that I had to negotiate my own commission. Some of them I did made zero commission because I saw the potential of getting the listing. And yeah, I'm only making the listing, but if I could get the listing, I could also get other listings in the area
Sure.
and also get buyers off of my sign. So
Exactly.
that's the value that I saw in it, because some people were like, oh, well, you're making double commission. I'm like, no, I'm just making this one commission on just selling this house. I didn't make commission on the buy side. And so a lot of agents or a lot of other people, they're just like, that makes zero sense. Like you're cutting yourself short or you're wasting your time. But obviously now I never wasted my time. I just knew what I was kind of doing and setting myself up for success, you know. So
Yeah, we had some connection issues. I think you're back now.
yeah, yep.
All righty, that makes sense. So can you tell me, if I understood you correctly, you got into it, you obviously wanted sellers. To advertise to sellers was a little bit cost prohibitive. So you figured there could be a way that I could find these properties and for the investors, right? And when you started looking, you initially just focused on MLS. So kind of like a lot of us, right? We have a lot of investors always reaching out when you're a new agent.
Oh
Hey,
yeah,
you know, we've got such and such budget, we got deep pockets, let's roll. But what they
yeah,
don't tell you is they have zero interest in MLS properties. Because like you, I've done the same thing. I would send them stuff that I would like look at the price per square foot, or I look at days on the market,
yeah,
kind of try to do my version of a distressed seller as much as I could, right? Try to find it. And
yep,
I was getting shut down by the investors, kind of like you. So
yeah.
that's really fascinating. How did you said you were kind of getting some deals here and there. What were the first kind of deals? What did they come from? How did you find these distressed sellers? Was it more like kind of driving the neighborhood and, you know, farming or canvassing, or what were the first successes that you experienced?
So basically, I think it was more off of Facebook and Instagram. I found a few investors that were also wholesaling because they would overbuy and have too much inventory. So they would like, I can't use this property. I'm just gonna sell it off and make, you know, 5 grand. And there was this one guy, he did it all the time. Like he would reach out, like I would reach out to him and be like, hey, do you have a property? Like I knew he was an investor and I would also sell him some properties too, like that I found. But when I first started, I found him and he's like, yeah, just, you know, see what what you can find, this and that. And then so you know, I had another investor also was asking me like, hey, like I'm looking for deals. So I'd reach out to that first guy and he'd be like, oh yeah, I have this property. This is how much I want for it. And here's the photos. And if you want to go look at it, here's a lockbox code. So gave that all that information and we checked it out. We tried negotiating it. Guy wouldn't budge. And we were able to, like the second investor was able to buy it off of him. And I made zero commission off of it. But the potential of that property, you know, to get my name out there and everything,
Mhm.
that's exactly what I did. So I was finding most of the deals off of either Facebook by networking, um, and then also like word of mouth, like through other people. It's like, hey, look, I have invest. Like I would just tell everyone in my office. Like every time I talk to someone, you know, I'd have a nice conversation, and before I leave, I'm like, hey, just get heads up. You know, if you have any bad properties or whatever it is, you know, give me a shot. I have someone that they'll buy cash. Cool.
Okay.
You know, so I would just like network like that, like through like everyone that I talked to. That's how I would get deals, and I would always get a deal like randomly, and it would be like a freaking fantastic deal. And they're like, "How'd you find this?" I'm like, "I don't know, just came across my desk, basically." Like, yeah, right. So,
That's really fascinating because that's how you and I clicked up. I
yep,
think I put up. I almost left. Remember, I
yep,
almost left the game, and I go, "Hey, I've got this, you know, stuff that needs to be handled. A couple of listings. Anybody willing to do it?" And you literally were like the first one. I got a string of messages after that, but it was like it went right into your phone almost. The speed was incredible, and I liked you right away, and we built trust. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the value of Facebook marketing, because so many people say, you know, you have to network, right?
yep,
Uh, you have to network, and that's exactly what you're talking about. In person, we sort of all understand the concept of whenever I have someone in front of me, I should always drop a little bit of, you know, information as to what
yep,
I'm doing. Perhaps they also have info, and in sharing that information, we're all becoming more successful. And you've always been great with that.
yep.
How does that process of networking take place on Facebook? Is there things you're putting up on your page to attract more investor minded clients? Or are you sort of getting to them through other agents and networking? What type of things and behaviors are you doing on Facebook that made you such a great networker? I mean, you ultimately know almost everybody. There's not a person I can bring up that you don't know.
Yeah.
So you've done a great job at kind of doing that.
I would just say it would just off of Facebook, people would just either add me or I'd go and add them because I'm like, oh, I've either worked with them or I've seen them, and I kind of like what they're doing, and it would just be like that where a mutual person either adds you or whatever, and it just like builds up like that. And then on your timeline, people are just like, hey, I have this deal, or hey, I'm looking for this, or whatever it is. And, I'd always comment. And, and then my thing is too, is if there's, someone that needs help with something that they post something or whatever it is, and I have, an opinion on it. And I'm not saying like, oh, like, screw, politics, this, politics, that, I'm not going to give you my opinion on Facebook.
Mhm.
You're just asking for disaster. But like if someone like just if it's real estate related, or even if it's whatever it is, I'll give them my opinion. And the way I'd see that is reaching out, giving my truest honest opinion. People then will always look on that, because if that post has a lot of comments, you'll see a lot of people go through some of the comments because they're like, why is this have this, or oh, that's a good question, I wonder what people's answers are. And then they would go and look through it, and then they would see like a few people. And usually I like to elaborate on my answers, so I'll answer it, elaborate on the reasons why. So it'd be like
Yeah.
or big comment, and a lot of people would read it and they would go and add me, or like, oh, like that's a good thing. And then, I'd go and conversate that way. And it's like, hey, if you have any other questions, reach out to me. Like I'm an open book,
So you
and
were finding ways to be valuable.
yeah. And that's all it was. Cause I would, I'd be bored for probably, 15, 20 minutes. Like I'm scrolling through, talking to people here and there, just, giving my little tidbits here and there. And then people would reach out to me either through Facebook Messenger, like, hey, like that like, can you elaborate more, or what's this, or what are you talking about this. And it's like, hey, look, just I'd rather not text it. Just here's my phone number, call or text me, whatever. Because that's my thing, is like, if it's something really, if there's like three parts to that answer where I can't just answer really quick, I'm like, just call me. Like I don't feel like. But then also at the same time, since I talked to them about it over the phone, they keep my number. I still have people like randomly call me and like, hey, I have a question on this or this and that.
Awesome.
And I'll give my like what my thoughts are and what I would do and stuff like that. And that's just basically how I built it out, and how I basically network that way. So
Was it your primary source of networking? Or the reason why I'm asking is this, I'm going to start from around the way. Like some brokers out there are of the opinion that some of these newer technologies, especially social media, could be very time wasteful, right? You can have an agent that just can't focus, and they're on Facebook without a purpose. I'm not saying that was you. Obviously, you treated it as a resource and you were able to capitalize on it in a great way. But as you're starting out and you're a new agent, was your broker like really involved in terms of, hey, don't waste your time on Facebook, or it was sort of hands-off policy? Were you at 100% brokerage right away, or was it some type of,
it was 100%, but I was on a team, so it was a split.
Oh,
So
okay.
my team lead, would always emphasize to everybody, like, oh, like you utilize social media,
Okay.
and but don't get consumed in it. Be be the creator. And
Gotcha.
but that was always my thing, because I grew up with technology, so I kind of know how it all works and all that stuff. So I was using that and Instagram, but mostly Facebook, just because Facebook is more, I feel like, more for networking.
Yeah.
I was also utilizing the marketplace too. So I'd have like random
Of
people in
course.
the marketplace, add me, like either, future clients or whatever it was. But that's what I would do. I would just post, I'd go and find houses on the market and
Mhm.
post them up. People would contact me, and I would have a flow and a script that I would just flow based off of that and gain leads and gain buyers. And that's how I basically took off, was just straight through the marketplace and didn't spend any marketing dollars.
That is a great tidbit right there, Josh. Because I always posted my listings through Marketplace because, again, there's just not enough places that your listing could be posted on, right? It should be everywhere. And so I've always done that, but I never thought of doing it to where maybe I'll pull out a nice property, take some good photos, and it's not my listing, kind of going in there and saying, hey, if you have questions, maybe somebody from my brokerage, like is that kind of how you did it? Was it your fellow agents' listings or just somebody random that you just thought the images were cool?
Yeah, so I would just go and I would find, so I had a crazy method to it. So I would try to, I was like, okay, let me try to get some $1 million listings because everyone likes looking at $1 million listings.
Sure.
I just had a lot of likes and a lot of comments, but that was it. Okay, that doesn't work. And then I'm like, all right, well, what about the average consumer? So I was like, okay, and this was back in like 2017. So I was like,
yeah,
all right, the average consumer is buying a house between, 220 to about 350. And it's okay, let me post the house in the 200s and let me post the house in the 300s. And that's basically what I would do. And I would do one with a pool, one without a pool. But they would have to look really nice. So that's exactly what I was doing. So I was doing this on a consistent basis every day. Every day I'd wake up, drink coffee, and about 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd post both of them. And then I would also like include my website link. So that way when you could go directly to there, go to my website, you click around like once or twice, and then it would ask you like, oh, you need to sign in order to see more information about this property. And then people would sign in, and then the lead would come straight to my phone, call them, do that. Or people would ask like, hey, is it still available? Like through the marketplace. I'm like, yes, it is. Are you working with a realtor? They'd be like, no. I'm like, okay, have you been pre-approved? Like some people are like, oh, what is that? And then I would explain it. And then they're like, oh, well, no, I just would rather look at the house. It's like, well, it's good to look at it because you don't know if you're approved for more or you might be approved for less. They're like, well, how do I figure that out? Well, you have to talk to the lender. And then I'd get them with the lender, and then the lender would pre-approve them. And then I would take them out shopping, and it would just be that whole process. And I was gaining a ton of business off of that. And then I kind of went away from doing that because I didn't have time anymore because I was working with, it was like 5 or 6 clients at a time. And I'm like, whoa,
wow,
this is crazy.
Yeah, your weekends must have been really slammed.
I would say I tried keeping my Sundays to myself, but mostly, yes, Saturdays, my Saturdays were, I wouldn't say too busy, but it was like I would either have a couple showings or I would always like, hey, let's start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, knock it out first. Cause
that's
it's
right.
too hot or it'd be, I'm like, yeah, just, I wanted to have my evenings and my afternoons to myself. So it's like, all right, let's knock it out, in the beginning of the day. And that's exactly what I would do. I would just knock everything out in the beginning and then come home, be able to write contracts and go from there.
So let me follow with my questions here, right? So you're having some success with buyers and utilizing some of these techniques that you just outlined, which are really cool. At what point are you getting sellers? Is that something that happened organically, like from a former client, or maybe from some of these investors that now maybe acquired a distressed property, even though you wouldn't make the money on that particular acquisition, you knew the listing was coming and you would make your 3% or 2.5%, whatever you're doing. So is that how the sellers started kind of trickling in? Because at some point, correct me if I'm wrong, did you end up having more sellers than buyers or no?
Yeah, eventually did, but at first it was nothing but buyers. So I was helping nothing but buyers and trying to get leads and all this. And I did get one. So my first listing, it didn't officially go into the market. So I guess you don't want first listing agreement signed, I guess you want to say. Found them on Facebook. They contacted me like, hey, look, I'm looking to sell my house. I'm like, okay, is this real? Like, and I'm like, okay, what's your number? So I talked to the lady, went to her house, and it was a decent home. It had a pool and stuff like that. And I'm like, awesome. Like, it has a pool. I know it's going to sell. Cleaned up a little bit, but it was good. And yeah, it was like trying to get photos. It was a good experience because I was trying to get photos out of the lady, like, and I guess I didn't set expectations right at the listing appointment. So I kind of do that now, but before I was just like, got all signs, like, all right, cool, like I'll contact you when I have the photos, when I have the photographer ready, and then we'll go live on the market. And she's like, okay, yeah, and then we just gotta go look at houses. All right, cool, you gotta get pre-approved. So she just took forever to try to get pre-approved, and I would always ask her like, hey, we gotta go get photos, and nothing. And I would also have people in the office like, oh, I want to go see it. I'd ask her, oh, today's not a good day. So
Um,
it became a deal where I wasn't able to sell it and do anything with it. So we just canceled it off.
yeah.
Uh, but basically, to answer your question, how I started getting more was, yeah, it was the investors that were basically finishing up on the rehabs, selling them, and then other people in the neighborhood would see that I was either selling the house, so they would call, ask, and I'd follow up with them. And then I was able to basically market towards sellers because I was getting buyers. So I was like, yeah, let me try. I did Zillow. I guess you want to call them Zillow ads. So I was doing Zillow, and
Hmm.
I made pretty decent money the first year. But what I didn't like was the return on investment. So I
Hmm.
would say it was about half. So I would spend
Wow.
3,000 and I would get 7, 8,000 back, but that's only $4 or $5,000 in my pocket.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, there has to be a better way. And that's when um I talked to Sean about Google. I'm like, let me see about Google. And I was like, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, all right, cool. This is time to get away from Zillow and just try Google. It's
Hmm.
screw it. Like, this is time to transition. And once I did that, that's when like more sellers just started trickling in and clicking on my ads, and I just follow up with them and just get seller leads like crazy. And then along with my listings from my investors, it was just like that's where it just started turning. And I'd have buyers here and there, but it just started turning more into like listing appointments, all that, and just took it from there.
And so, real quick, Sean is our Google mastermind. We need to give him a
Basically,
quick plug. If you want Google ads, you should definitely. What's the name of his company? You want to plug him out?
it's I think he has it under Everett Academy. His name is Sean Everett. So
Yeah. So look up the Everett Academy. Look up Sean Everett in the Las Vegas area. They're helping us tremendously in this Google world because, again, it's not like something you can just intuitively figure out like you would a newspaper ad or any type of even ads back, in the earlier Facebook and everything like that. Like I did some ads on Facebook myself. I did some ads on
yep.
Instagram. But when it came to Google, I knew right away that there's just too many moving parts. And the way that algorithm works is if you're not 100% certain and you're not keeping an eye on it like a live organism all the time,
Yep.
checking, making sure it's hitting the right type of attention, it's getting the right kind of eyes on it, then it becomes a really challenging thing. But for those of you guys that are looking for a good place, definitely hit up Sean Everett. Okay.
Yep.
And
And
so that's good.
it cut my budget from $3,000 with Zillow down to with Google. It went down to I was paying $1,000 a month,
Hmm.
and I was getting way more like listings and buyers as well. I'm like, whoa, like I'm over here making 10, 15,000 and only spending 1,000 when I could spend like a little bit more with Zillow and it would be around the same amount. It's like, whoa, like, so yeah, I haven't turned back at all.
To
And
Zillow.
yeah, so
I've done 6 months ads with Zillow, also hoping for a seller. For me, I always knew right away. I've heard this phrase early on through my YouTube searches, like you have to list to last. And I never forgot it. I always thought that if there's one activity I should be focusing on is some type of outreach to motivated sellers. Um, and so that makes sense that you made that shift as well. And so when you're working with the sellers, what was I going to ask you? Um, So you're organically picking up sellers from your investment. Now, of course, Zillow is a no-go. You're doing Google. My question here is this: you seem to be very comfortable as an agent. Like you were doing good numbers almost out the gate. You know, you've got some buyers. A lot of agents, it takes them 2 years and then they fail. You know, the statistics, guys, in our industry, they're pretty drastic. You know, within the 2 years, most of the agents are just not going to stick around. And if not, then maybe they won't make it through the 4-year mark. I
Yeah.
think you've been doing it for over 5 years, easy.
Yeah.
So why make that shift? You were comfortable. You know, you were making money with buyers. You had investors. You had, you know, you figured out the algorithm on Google. Like, why put on that headache? Was it just the return? Is that the factor that drove you to it? Not having enough return, having to spend that much to get something?
Well, so I started getting into like the investment side of things and seeing it from that angle. And then I would have either like, it's like, you know, I have too many projects to take on. And I would just like, let me, you know what, let me just, you know, sell this contract that I have off to another investor. And by that time I had, you know, plenty of investors. I had a ton of people. And then I also have the MLS as a resource. So it's like, okay, well, if I could go and if I can't wholesale it, I'm going to go and purchase it, put it on the MLS. And, you know, in another sense, it's like wholesaling because I buy it low and then sell it high. And that's exactly, you know, the options that I have as a realtor is I can go and actually purchase it and then go and resell it for a profit to another investor. And the only thing that sucks with that is when the investor sees what you purchased it for, they're like, oh no, like I can't, you know, if you paid 90,000 for, I can't pay this much, you know.
Even though it might be a good deal, right? They might have been interested, but when they see that you got such much better deal,
Yeah.
like what's the psychology behind that? Who cares what you got it at? If I, as an investor, make my margin, why do you think they care? Why does it affect them?
I think it's more of a, so with investors, I'd say it's more of an ego thing.
Yeah.
I'd say it's more of an ego thing because if you and I would say a majority of people, like if you were to go buy, I don't know, like go buy shoes, right? And you're like, oh, I got these shoes for, you know, 100, you know, $100. I'm like, how? Those are worth like $200. I'll sell them to you for 150. I'm like, no, because you got them for 100. Like, why would I pay you? No, like, sell them to me for 100. Like, what? Like, I wasted my time. This and that. No. I don't care about that. You know?
But do you think they feel like do they feel that you just getting lucky to get that number? They don't factor in the work that it might have taken, you know, the relentless pursuit of a lead, talking to a seller, maybe sitting at dinner tables and motivating them to go.
They care less.
They don't care. Yeah.
They don't care.
So,
because because I've talked to several investors and I did deals with a couple of investors, and that's exactly how they are. Like, I'm a very like fair person, and you know, some of these deals that I'm trying to get out of, that's the type of I like mentality that they have or ego that they have. Is like, well, you didn't really do much because you're a realtor. I was like, okay, well, you know, I found the deal. Okay, like, what'd you do? Sit behind your computer and do nothing? Like, come on. You know, I'm out here, you know, managing the crew. I'm out here doing this. I'm out here doing this. Like, okay, what are you doing? Sitting in the truck? You know, like, what are you're not out there working. Every time I see you, you have nice clothes on. Like, nice white shirt on while everyone else is dirty. Like, come on, man. Like, and they were like, oh, I always want more, this and that. So it's just, yeah, it's crazy because that's just the ego of it is like, well, I deserve more because I'm out here working. It's like, well, me too, but you know, I'm licensed and then I know what I'm doing. So you're basically paying me for my value, but they see it the other way because it's more of a selfish thing where it's like, well, I'm here working physically and you're over there working mentally, but they don't see it that way. So
it's almost like people, and investors included, and buyers, of course, they have this misunderstanding that, and maybe part of it is right, we have to give the devil its due. An average agent is that person. They probably aren't doing enough. You know, they're maybe closing 4 or 5 deals a year. And then for you to just say, well, what have you really done? Maybe you just got this pitch to you, or maybe your broker helped you out. Maybe, you had some resources, but you really didn't grind for it.
Yeah.
But let me assure you, successful agents like Josh here, it is not by coincidence. And if people only knew how much support we're getting, from our brokers, from the industry at large, it's not
Zero.
it's kind of laughable. That's why you're laughing, because at the end of the day, it's like sink or swim. And if you swim, good. So it's very Spartan mentality, where they just throw you in the water and hope that you make it. And those people that make it, like you, myself, they're not your average Joe. So like, if you have information or you came across a deal, it was because you hustled, you networked, you stayed on the phones, you did advertising, you spent advertising dollars. Not to mention the fact that we have to pay for licensing, we have to pay to belong to the GLDARs and all the other associations, and have to do continuing education. And no one has the time or the patience to listen to that. But that's just reality. A good agent, you have to take care of them. The question I had for you, along the lines of you working with investors in the beginning, were they themselves flippers or more wholesalers? Your first couple of investors that you met, and if they were wholesalers, did watching them make money or work or close or whatever, did that in part motivate you to try to want to do this?
Well, no, most of them were investors, where they would actually buy and flip them. Even the ones that were wholesaling them, they were only making like, 5,000-10,000. And I knew a couple wholesalers, but they're making only like 2, 3, 4, 5,000 bucks.
Wow.
And so I never had any interest in that at all, until I figured out like the numbers and how, basically how an investor buys property. And then I'm able to basically negotiate with the sellers on, purchasing a property, and then being able to have enough spread to sell it to an investor, and then still make, a decent return. And, as a realtor, every deal that you do, you make probably about 8 to 10,000. And then as a wholesaler, you're only making, you could potentially make, you're making your paycheck, whatever you negotiate. So you can make from 5,000, like $1,000 all the way up to like 100 grand.
Yeah.
It's very limitless depending on how you negotiate the deal. But at the same time, you don't want to screw over the seller, because you want to make more money. It's like, you got to figure out the fine line of what is good to the seller and what would motivate them, but then also be able to have someone come in, purchase it, and flip it, and still make a return. So trying to find those two lines is very hard, and bringing them together, and then making a profit in between of doing your work. So I guess that's the fun of it, is that, and basically making your own price, like you're making your own commission. So
yeah. And so there's a line where you always have to mitigate that greed, right? You have to mitigate your greed on the acquisition side, and then also on, selling it off side. So there's a pocket. And I agree with you. It's almost like whenever you get too greedy, both parties start getting a little antsy, because they're good with numbers. Maybe some sellers aren't necessarily, but they know when they're completely being pushed. Because you can push a deal and you can squeeze another 5, another 3, sometimes depending on the severity of their situation, just how distressed their situation is. You could be advantageous and be taking advantage of that. But I agree with you, and that's been our philosophy. I feel like we are repeat business or good reputation over just sheer profit, because we're not trying to do this for a year and then take off to Bahamas. We're trying to actually build a business that is reliable, that has a good reputation in the community, and ultimately, like we spoke via podcast, it's a way out for a lot of people. So you don't want to blatantly push them to the edge and make them feel away, feel that their ego is now hurt. And now that that's in the game, you may find yourself in a very bad spot. You push the deal, you already thought you got it in the bag, a little greedy, now they blew up. Now they're irate. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to trust you. And your buyer on the other side that's waiting for this to happen, now they can't purchase because you got too greedy.
Yep.
Same thing with the buyers, right? When we're doing selling off the properties, we have to, and that's the question I have for you. How much of an investor hat did you have to wear when you started wholesaling? And did your investor experience help you? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you knew what the flipper language is. You sort of knew cost approximate of repair. That's something that I was very impressed with when we first started working together. You had the back end of it, like you knew how the flipper would think. And thus, when we came with the deal to a flipper, we were speaking the same language. How
Yeah.
much of that experience is necessary for starting out wholesalers, at least knowing some things? Like they walk through the property. Somebody like myself, I'm working on it. That's not a strong point of mine. I'm good at negotiating. But when you show me the house, I'll just be like, hey, it's cute. Like I have like my wife's reactions almost. I'm like, cute, look at this open plan. Wow, look at that old bush. That's cute. Like
Yeah.
I see charm in things that may not be monetizable necessarily, you know? And the job of a flipper is to go in and go, yeah, it's cute, but we need floor, we need paint, let's check the plumbing, let's check, all that stuff. Did you kind of gain that experience over time, or did you feel that you were ready after doing a few flips?
Yeah, so I would say yes to both of those. It was doing the flips and gaining the knowledge over time, because we would purchase a property, and I would always ask, like, they would always change out the toilets. I'm like, well, the toilets are fine. Like, yeah, but you don't know that, it'll bust, or something will happen. I'm like, okay. And then they would, go and change, like, a lot of like things that you would never think of. Like there's like valves underneath the sink of either the bathroom or the kitchen. They would also change out the garbage disposal. Like there's a lot of things. I'm like, why not just reuse it? And all of them would tell me, like, well, it's better to spend, garbage disposal is $100. It's better to spend $100 rather than having this big, huge ordeal, because I can have a worker go in there that's not a licensed plumber and swap it out, and I could test it, make sure it works, all the functionalities are there. Now, if it's the used one, and let's say it jams up during an inspection,
Yes,
now they're
sir.
gonna ask you for a licensed plumber. Now you're spending $100 for a new garbage
I'm in it.
plus now you're spending, a service call, and if they have to replace it, you're getting charged to replace, you're getting charged all these fees. So $100 turned into, $400 or $500 call to get that swapped out. So I'm like, oh, so I'd always ask questions about everything. And I'm like, well, why is this getting changed out? Or and then sometimes they'll look at me like, why are you asking some of these questions? Like some of these questions don't make sense. And I would let them know, like, well, I don't know, I'm curious of why you're doing this stuff, because that way I have knowledge of it. So if someone asks me like, hey, are these, faucets new, or how are these faucets wired? I could tell them like, hey, this is how it was done. And or the electrician or the electricity, it's like, oh, well, why are you changing all the plugs, and all that stuff. So I'd ask all the questions, and I started, grasping on it. And then now when I go in there, I could actually look and see, okay, well, the outlets look older, those will probably have to be swapped out, because, that could be either cause, a shortage. And if you do have a shortage, then you have a GFI that's going to go out. And then if you have a GFI at the box that goes out, you have to then change out that breaker, just like there's a lot of it that goes into it. It's like, okay, so you just start, looking at it, say, okay, every house needs paint. Like that's off the bat. Like you need to paint the inside the house, outside the house. And just because when you go inside a house and it's not painted, you can still smell what was before.
Yeah.
Versus smelling like new paint. People are like, oh, like this, people get comfortable, get that, like that
Yeah.
warm, fuzzy feeling, like, oh, okay, like, ooh, and the floor's nice. And, and like, those are just like the basics that you have to do, like flooring, paint, and then you go see the cabinets. The first thing you want to look at when you look at cabinets are underneath all the sinks. So if you have a bathroom sink, you have kitchen sinks. And I learned that from a client, and I would always ask, client, like, why are you looking underneath the sink? And like, well, I'm trying to see if there's any leaks. Like, why would there be a leak? But I never knew because, like I was a realtor. I bought maybe one or two houses and I never had a under the sink leak. I'm like,
Sure.
oh. And that's where I learned some of that, because then you could see how either the floorboard of the cabinet is either warped, how it either had previous leak and stuff like that. And knowing this knowledge is also powerful too, because if you can go into someone's house while you're doing your due diligence or your inspection, I guess you want to say,
Mhm.
of a wholesale deal, or purchasing it as an investment property, you go in there and you're looking at everything. And I always ask all the people, I'm like, hey, like, is there any rooms or any closets that you don't want me to go into? They always look at me funny. They're like, no, like, you could go into any like room or closet. Like, why would you ask that? I'm like, I'll just, you never know what's in your closets or what's in your bedrooms. I don't know. And
Yeah.
they always like kind of laugh at it, like, oh, okay, that's weird. And I say it just to see if there's, either kids in there, like, oh no, like in this room, just knock, they're sleeping or whatever it is. Or if it's like, well, I'm gonna be looking through your cabinets too. Is that okay? Like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's fine. And then I would go turn the water on. I would flush all the toilets. And yeah, I'm going to switch out the toilets, or the toilets are going to get switched. But you want to make sure that there's no leaks that are happening,
Mhm.
because someone could know you have an appointment. You're going to go over there. They're going to clean up everything, make it, try to look as good as it should, as it hopefully should, especially distressed properties.
Yeah.
Uh, well, some of them, some people just, they have no shame. But
Yeah.
but yeah, you just like run the water, and then you look underneath the sinks. Same thing with the toilets. You do that, do the showers, and and then what I always like to do is, I always like to look at like the baseboards and
Mhm.
the caulking around the bathtub.
That's right.
Because if the caulking is cracking, there's some type of moisture that's making it crack. And then if you look at the baseboards at the both ends of it, you can tell that, and most of the time they're going to be warped, like
Mhm.
90% of the time. Why? Is because when people have shower curtains, the water will splash out, and it over time it warps.
Sure.
So I always bring that, and then I'll always look in the showers to see if there's any cracks in the tile and stuff. And if there's a crack, I'll like take my two fingers and tap on it, because if it's hollow, that means there's potential water damage in there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I just do that. But back to like where with the baseboard swelling, so I'll let the seller know. I'm like, all right, yeah, no, if it's upstairs or downstairs, or usually they stay in the living room or wherever they're at. I'll go
Sure.
back. I'm like, hey, look, these are things that can kind of concern me. The baseboard in here, it kind of swelled up. Do you have any idea about that? And they'd be like, oh, I didn't know this. Can you show me? So I'll bring them over there. I'm like, here, check that out. I'm like, you see how like the caulking is cracking, and then this. That means, yeah, I know it's a shower, but there's no. I see that there's nothing there to catch the water, so it's basically sitting there leaking and sitting on.
Mhm.
So you might have undetected mold. It's probably not a lot, but yeah, I don't know. That's one concern of mine. So I don't know, if this is something that I want to take on because it has mold. But and then I'll just like point out everything, and I always look at ceilings too, because you could see, if there's any leaks or anything like that, or discoloration. So I would point out everything and look at everything. And after talking to the seller, and then I come to my number, I'll let them know, like, give them a call later on, like, hey, after I looked at it, took the pictures, this is what it is. And the seller, I'm like, and I'll always lead up to it where it's like, hey, this is the concerning thing of mine. I'm not sure if I want to purchase it, but I talked to one of my contractors. I might have to have them out there, but they're going to look at it for me and see if it's a big concern, or if it's not. I don't know. But this is where the number I'm at with that, and I'll just take it on as is. And if it is mold, I guess I'll take a loss on it. If it isn't mold, cool, I'm happy, but whatever. And they'll be like, oh, okay, awesome. You know, and they're happy with that number just because I pointed these things out. Now mold, it's about 95%. You don't have, there's no concern about mold. All it takes is bleach or kills, and that's it. You're good to go. If anyone, you know, heard me say that, they'd freak out, like especially a mold person or a remediation person.
Mold inspector?
Yeah, or a remediation person. Like I told a remediation person that, and I'm like, well, can't you just add bleach to it and call it a day? And he freaked out. He's like, whoa,
oh, dare you?
Oh yeah, he's like, you can't just do that. That, you know, you're gonna damage this, damage that, and I'm like, what? Like, well, you just cut it out and then you just add mold to the concrete. You call it a day. No, there is a process that you need to do. I'm like,
yeah.
And I asked my contractor that too. I'm like, you know, they're like, nah, they're just trying to do their job and get more money. I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
You know, that's one thing that you notice right away when I moved here to Colombia is they don't build with drywall. This is like monolith. I don't know if it's cement or whatever it is, but you see these buildings coming up here, there is very little wood, you know, and so, because, you know, here it rains so much, I always ask my wife, I go, how are these guys building here? You know, there's just no way you could build a traditional house that you see in US here, because it would just rot. Like you'd be working against the clock. You'd put up a wall, okay, and then next day it would rain and your wall's gone. You know, that's it. Here, they don't build like that. And that's one of the things that, I guess, to your point, right? I always thought, look, it's just, you can literally cut it out. It's not the end of the world. You cut all of that out. I mean, that's remediation in a way. Obviously, it's maybe not as thorough, but, you know.
It's cheaper to change out drywall than it is to hire a remediation company.
Yeah.
So all you gotta do is cut it out, and then you cut like about a foot extra than what you should. And then you peel it back and you're like, okay, cool. Like there's no mold between these points. And then you look at the top. Okay, there's no mold between these points. Cool. Replace it. Call it a day.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, is that something that when you go to market with that property, do you have to notate that that occurred, or is that case by case?
Off the record, you technically don't, because when you purchased it, you had no knowledge, and when you did the rehab, technically the contractor did it, and you still have no knowledge.
I got you. So it's that you having the knowledge. I get
and again, like if it's dealt with the correct way, like if it's gone altogether and doesn't come back or anything like that, nobody's really gonna know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
I had a question for you as a follow-up to, so you go in there, you meet with somebody. I've been in situations where you go and the guy that you're talking to, the seller, he may be a plumber, he may be a contractor, he may be a construction worker. So now he sort of has his own opinions about things. And when have you ever run into that situation? And what do you recommend to do? Let's say he pushes back. You go, well, and then here I'm going to need to, you know, fix the tub. I'm going to need to fix the baseboard. He goes, man, that's BS. You don't need 5,000. My guy can do it, or I can do it for 200-300. You know, so let's say there's a little bit of that. What's your advice to those investors out there that are running into someone that, you know, at least claims to have the knowledge on how to repair things?
Well, basically, what I do, because I have ran into like either a handyman or some type of worker that he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he'd be like, it doesn't cost that much to do that. It's like, and I'm like, well, because what it is like, if someone tells me, oh, well, you know, there's it's only cracks between the tiles and the shower, like I could just seal that back up. It's only going to cost me, you know, caulking is like, you know, a couple bucks, and it's going to take a couple, maybe like 20-30 minutes of my time. It's like, yes, but I don't know what's behind there. It's like, well, and then, you know, their rebuttal would be, well, I could open it up, see, and then just put the tile back on there. It's like, yes, but if you're going to do that, it's going to kind of come out looking, you'd suspect it because you could see that there. Now I am buying this property as is, and with that little, with that defect or whatever it is, I'm just, instead of me trying to figure out what it is, I'm just going to replace all the tile in the shower. Just
I
make
like it.
easier. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So that's why it's going to cost me so much, is because I see that it's messed up already. Why go and try to fix it when I could just
Yeah, put a Band-Aid on it. Might as well rip it off. Yeah.
might as well, and make it look newer. And I've had instances like that where they would always like, oh, I can fix this or I can fix that, or I have someone that can fix that. And it's like, yes, but why would I want to buy your property if it hasn't been fixed already and you know about it? And it's like, I know that you know somebody, but I have my own people that I trust. Not saying I don't trust you or your
Right.
person, but if my person messes up, after I buy it from you, then he's gonna go and replace it for free. If your person does it, and
or
yeah,
them.
let's say they're not licensed or whatever it is, I'm gonna call you back and I'm gonna tell you, you need to come fix this. And you might not have the money, based on your situation to fix it now, but then you will. And if it's not done correctly, I'm gonna ask you to do it correctly, but I don't want to call you. I that's the last thing I want to do. Once this transaction is over, I want it to be done for. Like, I just want it to be, I want you to go on your happy way, and I'll go on my way. If something's really messed up on the house, hey, that's my problem. It's like, if the roof caves in next day I buy it, I'm not calling you, I'm calling my roofer. That's my problem. So I want you to be, happy, with everything. And, that's basically kind of how I put it. It's like, I kind of don't strong arm them, but I try to tell them like you haven't fixed it. And I don't know how long. And, I'd rather me deal with it rather than you deal with it.
And that is really cool. I really like how you did that, because, correct me if I'm wrong, it is such a subtle way to sort of take charge.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is a legit concern. They are a handyman. They know down to a penny how much it's going to cost to go pick up at Home Depot, come back. They know down to a minute how much time it's going to take, and maybe they're going to do a great job. But what you're doing there is you're sort of saying, we're not going to do this whole back and forth on everything that I tell you I want to fix. I'm always going to have to come to you. And then we're going to have a powwow, and then you're going to give me your opinion. Like, you're sort of killing it on the spot. You're saying, look, it's just how I buy. I want it all to be my problem. I have my own resources. I've been doing it this way. No disrespect. And obviously, all respect to you and your knowledge. Not trying to get in an argument here, but you're doing like a little sidestep, and you're sort of reminding them that, look, at the end of the day, this is my purchase, and I sort of can dictate some of these things because I'm the guy coming with the money that's going to bail you out of this situation. I really like how you do that. I listening to it didn't feel bullied. I didn't feel pushed. I sort of felt like, yeah, I don't want that headache. What if I fix it? Or what if I don't have the time? Like you said, you've been procrastinating, sir, ma'am, for X amount of years. Now, all of a sudden, here you are, the most industrious person, just going to find the time to do it on your weekend, which you haven't done in years. You don't say that necessarily, but I like how you're sort of hitting on some of these points and in a very gentle way saying, it's my show. Is that right?
Yeah, and I would say that, and I guess it also shows expertise. It also shows that what's the word? Not really expertise, but it shows that you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, because it's not your first rodeo. So people can, like, they can smell that, they can see that, like what we said on the last podcast, is that people can smell bullshit. And when I tell people that, it's like, you know what, don't worry about it, I'll handle it. I know how much it's going to cost. If it costs more, I put that in my numbers, just in case something costs a little bit more than what it should, because I put an extra 5-10K cushion on there, because something always goes wrong during a rehab. And most people that renovate their house, or that have renovated a house, they always know that there's always something that comes up. And every time I say that, and people have, done a house or renovated their house a little bit, they're like, oh, yep, I know what you're talking about. Like, I hate when something like that happens. Like, yeah, that's why I build a cushion in there to do that. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's smart. So they know it's going to come in a little bit under, and, I just basically just talk to them and explain it all. on how I buy and why why I do things. So that way, when I hit them with my number, I remind them again, like, this is how I buy and this is why I buy. And then, they're like, oh, okay, that sounds good.
Let me ask you, do you prefer flipping or wholesaling, and why?
I'd say I would say I like flipping because I can get really creative with it. And when once you sell it, you get the profit and everything out of it. But then I do also like wholesaling, just because you don't have to put in work. Well,
Mhm.
you don't have to put in like the work on the property in order to get a return. And some
Rehab.
Yeah, and sometimes you could get a greater return by just wholesaling rather than flipping. But it just, I don't know, both has its things. I do like the flipping part of it just because it's like you get to go shopping, and get creative with the flooring and with everything. And then
Mhm.
once people buy it or once people go see it, they're like, wow, like, yeah, this is something that we've been looking for, or I like how this and this and this. Like, I kind of like feed off those comments because it's
Yeah.
a good feeling, you know.
So what is the negative about flipping? Is it mainly managing the contractors?
I would say, yeah, it's all about the timing, managing the contractors, trying to get everything going. And then some contractors, they always have their own opinion, or they don't do something correctly. So it's like,
Mhm.
if you're going there, they're taking notes. They're like, oh, it's like, hey, I want the fixtures done. I want this, this, and this, and this, and
Yeah.
I'll give them, all the stuff. And then you walk in there again, you're like, well, why is that ceiling fan right there when it's supposed to be in this room? And then this room ceiling fan is supposed to be over here. And then
Oh,
they're like, well, is it a big deal? I'm like, well, I never said for this ceiling fan to be there. I'm like, it's not really a big deal, but you kind of didn't do what I asked you to do. I hate being that person, but at the same time,
mhm.
it's like, I kind of asked you to do this. And, if I let you do this one time, or I'm like, you know what? Ah, it's not a big deal. I don't care. Then they're not going to care about their job on the next job. So I
Yeah,
have
I
to
see.
correct it. So that way, if they bitch and complain about it, they're not going to do it again, or they're extremely
Yeah,
try not to. So I hate being that person that's like, oh yeah, like, switch this, switch that around because you messed up. But at the same point, is like, if you allow it, it's just going to keep happening. So
yeah. And so how does a wholesaler or a flipper, I guess flipper in this case, somebody's looking to flip their first property. What do you recommend they do in terms of finding a good GC?
um I would say, well, there's different types of, I guess you want to say, GCs out there. So there's general
Mhm.
contractors that go out there and they have somebody for everything. Then there's also, I call them glorified handymen because
Okay,
they're licensed to be a handyman, but they do the work of a GC. And
gotcha.
the way that they do the work of the GC is they basically are registered under the state as a handyman that renovates properties.
Okay.
And they act as a GC, as in they are able to, contract out, the all the work, but at the same time, they're just a handyman, so they're a little bit cheaper.
So they're not licensed and bonded, right? We hear that a lot in our industry.
They're like, no, they're
Licensed,
licensed and
bonded.
bonded. They're licensed and bonded, but they just
Oh,
don't
okay.
have that license of a general contractor. They're not on the
Oh, okay.
contracting board. They're just a handyman.
Oh, okay.
But they're all licensed. They're all bonded. They all, well, they should be. And yeah, and then they all have like their business insurance, all that fun stuff. And I know
And
I
say, real quick, talk about why that's important, right? Let's say you and I are just taking some guy off of Craigslist and he's just doing this part time. He's
oh
not licensed or bonded, but maybe he's really skilled at making cabinetry. And we go, dude, why pay these guys extra 2 grand when we can get this guy for this price point? It's definitely is tempting. What would you say to those investors that are thinking of cutting those costs by using someone in their family or somebody not licensed, not bonded? Like, what's the difference there?
I would say you really, really have to vet them out, because if they're not licensed or bonded, but they can actually say they can do the work, because everyone says, "Oh, I can do the work, I can do the work,"
Yeah,
and it comes out looking like you spent, $1,000 when it should have been in reality $3,000. But you
gotcha.
took the $1,000 route, and you're like, "Oh fuck, like why did I do that?" And you could basically hold that general contractor to it, and if they don't do it correctly, um, like for instance, I had a buddy that did a shower, and he hired someone that's not a licensed flooring company, or flooring contractor, and they didn't do the grading correctly. So in the back of the shower, it wasn't graded correctly.
Oh
So
no.
it was like flat, and then it kind of went down, and so it started pulling water. So
Sure.
water started like pulling.
Accumulating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I told him, I was like, "Well, why don't you call the guy back and have him do that?" He's like, "Well, he's gonna charge me hourly." What? Like he didn't do the job right the first time. He's like, "Yeah, but he's not a flooring. He's just a regular worker." Like, well, have him come fix that shit. Like he messed up. And the guy he just was like, "No, I charge you hourly." But at the same point, it's like, why would you want that same guy go back and try to fix
Sure.
what he did, And that's
Yeah.
what you kind of get with that one person. Now with a general contractor, you something like that happens, and you can tell them like, "Look, this is what happened, and can you get someone else to do it?" Or even if you tell them like, "This is what happened," he'll go over there, he'll look at it, and he'll be like, fuck, like he'll go back to that worker and be like, "What'd you do? Like, why'd you do that?" You know what? I'm not having you fix this. I'm having someone else. You could do the demolition on it. I'm having someone else fix it and do it right the next time, and you're gonna sit there and watch them. And I'm not
Hmm.
paying you to watch them either. And that's what a lot of general contractors do, that I know that work for like flooring companies or stuff like that. Like
Hmm.
a lot of these people, they when they mess up, they'll tell them like, "Hey, look, like you're gonna watch them and learn from them, because I can't afford this, because now I have to do it for free, because
Hmm.
it was supposed to be right. It was supposed to be done the right way the first time."
First time. Yeah.
And that's what you kind of get with the GC, and some of these glorified handymen, you get the same type of service, is because they want more deals from you, so
Hmm.
they're gonna do that, versus if you find a person off of Craigslist that could do everything.
Hmm.
Your time is very, very valuable of flipping, so one person can't do everything. Even if they say they can, it's like they might be able to do everything, but they're not great at everything.
And
But
slower, a lot slower.
very slower. So if they say, they can get a house out within 30 days, that's BS. And I
Yeah.
don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. You cannot get a house out in 30 days by yourself, or even with one other worker. It's what it is. I had
Hmm.
one person tell me that, and I call bullshit on him. And he got the house done in like 60 days. And the guy was asking, and the other investor was asking me, like, "Hey, why is he taking so long?" I was like, "Remember when I told you to begin with that he cannot get houses out?" Because he was saying he could get the whole house done within 20 days.
Wow.
And I called bullshit. And I was like, "No, that's not possible." And the other investor was like, "How's that not possible? Like he says he could do this, and I know his work and stuff like that. Like he said he could do it." I'm like, "He can't do it," and it took him 60 days to do it. And then at
Hmm.
the end, he's like, "Well, I didn't think that the property need that much stuff done. I thought it was just flooring, paint, and this and that." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. The lighting needs to be redone. Like this house is from the 90s, and you're
Yeah.
asking to sell it in 32 years later in the same condition, but with paint and flooring. Like,
Right.
what about electrical? What about the bathrooms? Like, if you're just doing flooring and paint, yeah, you could do it in 3 days.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
But not a whole house.
Right. No, that's
So
cool.
that's
These
kind
are
of what
really
you got
good
to
tips.
look out for, and kind of vet them, and kind of see what their portfolio is like. And what I mean by that is like, because a lot of workers, they always take pictures of everything because they're very prideful on their work.
Right.
And you know, if it's only one house that they show you, you know, you kind of want to do it in pieces. Like, okay, you know what? I'll hire you next time, but if you can just do all the cabinetry, or if you could just do all the baseboards in this one, see how their work ethic is. You know, you got to really vet them out and see how well they work under pressure, and you know, work well with others and stuff like that. And then you really see their true colors. And if they could take that on, it's like, okay, well, let's see what else you could take on. So you just really can't trust, you know, someone's word on, oh, I can do this, I can do it cheaper. You know, like anyone can do it cheaper, but can you really do it is the question.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to run into issues with repairs. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. And I'll see some of these houses when I show them to clients, and I could just sit there and just like pick out things. I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe they really did that, or damn, like they did this the cheap way. And
Yeah.
you know, clients will ask me like, because they know, like most of them will know like what I do or how I do things, and they'll be like, oh, like what do you think about this property? I'm like, well, it's nice, it's like moving ready, but there's a few things that like stood out to me. Like I'm not sure if they're a big concern of yours, and they're like, well, what is it? All right, well, let's walk through it. So I'll walk through and like pick out things, and they're like, I never saw that. Oh wow, I didn't see that on the ceiling. It's like, yeah, but we can always ask for this stuff, you know, during the inspection process, blah blah blah. And it sure enough will come up on the inspection, or you know, I'll be there with the inspector and I'll ask questions, and the inspector will bring it up or go in the attic and look and like, oh yeah, there is a leak, you know, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
No, you want to definitely do that.
yep.
I remember my parents were selling their house in Georgia, and they got a buyer. And my dad is one of those sellers, you know, if he could, he'd FISBO everything himself. He knows everything. I can't believe it, you know. I do all these sales, and my dad is like my nightmare client, you know. And so they do an inspection, and they found a rat infestation on the roof.
Oh,
And my dad calls me, he's like, I mean, what do you think? Should I, like, you know, deal with it? Should I give him the money for it? I go, Dad, you're like dead to rights. Like, you have rats in there, dude. You have to do something. Either kick them out, okay, and reinspect, or give these guys the credit for like shop it. You know, you can do that.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can call 3 different companies, come up with your total, like do your repair request response and do it adequately. But even in my family, sometimes I go, Dad, you know I do this. Like, you know my struggles. And you saying these things. Of course you got to get the rats out, you know?
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, dude, you want to wrap this up for this one? And then maybe on one of the other few podcasts, we'll dive into what got me into it. Because I feel like it helps us if we have kind of like a little bit of a back and forth, and I can think with you, think alongside with you, and kind of understand your experience. But thank you so much for sharing. This is really cool. And I hope people watching are also picking up and learning stuff. As always, you know, please hit the like, subscribe buttons. Leave us some comments, whatever you want to talk about. Please bring it up as subjects, and we'd love to indulge. And for now, I think we're going to sign off. Yeah.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
All right. It was good to see you, man.
Yep.
All right.